Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 540 for the 25th of Iyar in a regular year. So the other day, I was having a philosophical discussion with a friend about the concept of God and about how this word God that we use is really so imperfect and almost problematic in a way, because it's really been misconstrued, misused, co-opted by a lot of other religions, by secular society. And even within Judaism, sometimes it can get very confusing as to what is God? Like, who is God? What comes to mind when you think about God? So for a lot of people, the image that there's conjured up in their minds when they think about God is they think of this old man in the sky who's has a long white beard and who's smiling down at the whole world or something like that. That's not God, you know? And what about, like, if we would say, okay, so God is this being that created the world, created the heavens and the earth. It's like, okay, maybe that's like an aspect of how we relate to God and understand God, but that too is not God. Maybe we can say that God is like the animating force in all of creation. This is something that's like a more Eastern kind of view. Animism believes this. Animism believes that in every single physical object, there's like a spiritual power that is kind of like, you know, God, basically, that can help us in some way. So it's like you look at the tree, you look at the rock, you look at a house, you look at a book, all these things each all have God within them. We don't believe that as Jews. We don't believe that God is contained in any one thing. So while it's true, and we learn in Chassidus, and this is where it's a really nuanced, perhaps, or a finer point to really understand, it's true that there is nothing in the world that exists apart from godliness. So the book does not have an existence of its own. The tree does not have an existence of its own. The stone does not have an existence of its own. And all their whole entire existence is nothing but godliness, but God. It's totally dependent on God. But yet God cannot be defined in any one of these things. And not only, as we'll learn today, can God not be defined in any one of these physical objects, but God can also not be defined as anything spiritual. So this is another misconception that people sometimes have, is they think that, okay, what is God? God is spirituality. Like, people will say, I'm feeling very spiritual today. I'm connecting with God. You know, I'm removing myself from physicality. And what they're failing to understand is God is no more spiritual than he is physical. And God is something that's beyond all of these definitions, beyond all of these limitations at all. And so in today's episode, what we're really going to focus on is the spirituality, is the fact, and we're really going to get into the spirituality and talk about how that those myriads of worlds and those spiritual realms, they may be very spiritual, and they may, in a certain sense, reveal godliness a little bit more than it's revealed down here in our physical world. But on another level, they actually conceal the essence of God to the same extent that God is concealed down here. Because God, in his essence, is not found in any one of those places. And this is really related to what we learned about yesterday. You can go back and listen to yesterday's episode if you'd like a refresher on that, about the idea of the soul, and how we talked about how the soul is not found, the essence of the soul is not found in any one particular part of the body. Like, you can't say that the soul is more in the hands than it is in the foot. It's more in the heart than it is in the stomach. And even when we talked about the mind and how we said that the soul is more revealed in a certain way inside of the mind, it's not more present in the mind than anywhere else. The soul is equally in the brain as it is in the hand. And not only is it equally there, it's equally concealed. Even within the brain, you can't look inside the brain. Nobody's going to like open up the brain and do like an autopsy on somebody and say, aha, here is the soul. You will not see that soul in any part of the body. It's hiding. It's not there in a revealed way. And so today we're going to learn about how this is equally the same case in terms of God, and how even in the most spiritual realms, in every single realm that there's no place in the spiritual realms that we can point to and say, aha, this is God. This is where God is contained. God is equally hiding in the spiritual realms as he is here in our physical world. But with that being said, that leaves us with the question that we've been grappling with in these past couple of episodes about if God is equally concealed and thus equally present in everything, then how can we say that there are some places that in which God dwells? Like we were talking about the Holy of Holies, that God dwells in the Holy of Holies. And yesterday we started to get into this answer a little bit, and we liken this to the soul again, as we've been talking about, and how when this is, on the one hand, the soul permeates the entire body in equal measure. On the other hand, there's no particular part of the body in which we can say that the soul is essentially there. Like there's something about the soul that's actually beyond the body. But on the other hand, we can say that in terms of the revelation of the light of the soul, which again, it's not the same thing as the soul itself, but in terms of the revelation of the light of the soul, we can, once we're talking about the soul's light and the soul's radiance, then we can say that this light of the soul is more revealed in a certain way in the brain, and that this revelation of the light of the soul, it initiates, the initial revelation happens in the brain, and then from there it permeates to the entire body. And this is similar to how we can understand how God's radiance, again, not he himself, but God's radiance is more revealed in the Kodesh Kadoshim, in the Holy of Holies, than in any other place in the world. And that the vitality, the radiance that keeps this world alive and animated initiates from that place of the Kodesh Kadoshim. So I think a really apt analogy that can help understand this is by thinking about a light show. So speaking of light shows, I actually went to see a light show at the Botanical Gardens here in Brooklyn. I've actually been a couple of times at this point. I think they do it every year. And if you haven't seen it already and you live in Brooklyn, I highly recommend it. It's really cool. There are all these like illusions that they do with the light using trees and water and stuff like that. And so this really brings to mind the subject of light that we've been discussing. And what is light exactly? Let's think about light for a little bit. So on the one hand, there's something very simple and something very singular about light. Like, light doesn't change at all, but yet the manifestation of that light can be so diverse and so different and manifest in so many different ways. So going back to the light show, like that's the thing that's really incredible about it all, is like the movement, the scenery, the action, the show, the performance. It's so diverse and so multifaceted, and the images that were produced and the colors and the shapes and everything like that. But where it's all coming from is it's all just light. It's all coming from one light. And light in its own way, like when we just look at light as it is, light is actually totally simple and totally without description at all. And what made the light show into the light show is actually, perhaps ironically enough, not so much the light, so much as the vessels into which the light was being projected. So when we say like red light, blue light, green light, those things, light doesn't have color. So, there's different ways to experiment with how to produce color in light. It's really all about the reflection of what the light is being reflected off of. What's the vessel within which the light is being contained? Prisms work like this, stained glass windows, all of this kind of stuff. And light, as we'll see, is a very big topic in Chassidus. Because as we'll see, light is a very good analogy which can help us understand godliness and understand God's flow in this world. And one thing that comes up often in Chassidus is the contrast between two different types of influence and how God's influence is present here in this world. One is referred to as light, which in Hebrew is or, Aleph Vav Resh, and the other is referred to as Shefa, Shin Pei Ein, so which is better translated as like influence. So it's not the time to really get too much into detail with both of these, but I think it would be helpful to kind of give a brief definition in order to really appreciate what it is that we're going to be learning about today, and appreciate the idea of light is to see what the difference is. What's the difference between the influence that comes about through Or and the difference that comes about through Shefa? So when we think about Shefa, a good way to really understand the type of influence by which Shefa works is water. So if you take water and you pour it from a pitcher into a cup, so the water goes from the pitcher and now it is in the cup. And maybe the water can actually now also take on different colors and different shades, just like light can take on different colors and different shades. However, the difference between when you pour water from a pitcher into a cup versus if you were to take light and shine it from a light bulb into a cup is that in the first example, namely in the example of the pitcher into the cup, the water no longer is in its source. The water is no longer in the pitcher. The water now is only found in that cup. Versus when we talk about the light, when the light is shining from the light bulb into the cup, the light is still very much present in the light bulb, even though it's really manifest now in the cup. It didn't lose its connection to its source, to the light bulb, in the same way that the water did. So in Chassidus, the way this is explained is basically that like when there's an influence in terms of Shefa, then the influencer gets affected by what's happening. There's a change in the influencer to that which is being, when they go about influencing. Versus when we're talking about a type of influence that comes about by way of Or, by way of light, there's no change in the influencer. And while the influencer can influence in many different ways and in many different facets, in its source, the influence stays the same. And this is why Or is such an apt analogy for understanding God, because as we've been studying in the past few episodes is exactly this point, that while God may manifest himself in many different places here in this world, through many different vehicles and many different channels, ultimately God himself cannot be limited to any one of these things. Just like we said, like the same thing, like with the analogy of the soul, the human soul, that while the soul is present in the foot, it's present in the brain, it's present in the heart, it's present in the hand, it's not limited to any one of these things. And it's equally found and it permeates all of these things equally. But yet, just like the light, it also has its own entity that is hidden within the body, and it's not actually contained by the body at all. Nevertheless, as we learned with the soul, for example, while the soul may be present equally in the entire body, in terms of revelation of the soul's light, which manifests as its influence, then there is something about the brain by which we can say that the soul is a little bit more revealed there, and that the brain serves as the literal nerve center for the entire body, and from which the vitality of the entire body flows from. So this can help us understand what we're getting at is the question that we brought up a couple of episodes ago as to how it could be that while God is present everywhere in the world equally to an equal degree, then how is it that there are some places that we call holy, that some places we say that's where God dwells? And so basically the Alter Rebbe is really giving us the refined technicality of the definition here, that it's not that God is more present in some places than others. In fact, God is equally present everywhere and he's equally hidden everywhere. It's just that there are some places that we can say that God's influence, just like the light, is revealed a little bit more than it is in some other places. And as we'll learn, as far as the revelation or the concealment of God's light goes, when it comes to this world, this physical world in which we live, the concealment is so thick. The concealment of this light is really thick. It's the strongest concealment of any other place. Yet, nevertheless, lest this maybe leave us with a feeling of despondency of how concealed God is here, just like in the analogy of the soul, where we said that, like, yes, it's true that, the light of the soul is more revealed in the brain than it is in the foot or something like that. And in another sense, the true reality is that the soul itself that's just in terms of the light of the soul. But when we talk about the soul itself, the soul is equally concealed in the brain or in the foot. It's because essentially the soul is, we're not seeing the soul in any essential way. We're only seeing the soul's light, the soul's manifestation of in terms of vitality. But at the same time, not only is the soul equally concealed, the soul is equally present in all places of the body, which means that the soul is actually just as much present inside the foot as it is inside the brain. So what this translates to into the analog in terms of the world in which we live, then yes, our world is the epitome of concealment of God's light. Yes, that's very true. We definitely do not, experience godliness and God's light in any way that can be compared to what the higher spiritual realms experience. However, when we talk about God's light itself, the actual, the source of the light, that is equally concealed, yes, in all of the worlds, including ours, but it's also equally present. So God is just as much here and present in our world than he is in the higher spiritual realm. So this sort of leaves us on a little bit of an uplifting note. So with all of this being said, I know this was a long introduction. Let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this. And for context, we are still in the middle of chapter 51. We're actually in a new section of chapter 51 today, and it's sort of divided into two sections, and this is going to be the conclusion of chapter 51. And so the Alter Rebbe begins, and he says that just like this, just like we were talking about when it comes to the soul, this idea of, by way of analogy, then how the soul fills the entire body. So we can say the same thing, that God fills all of the worlds in order to vivify them. And in every single world, there are an infinite number of creations to an nth degree, totally beyond limits, myriads upon myriads, many different levels of angels and of souls. And so to worlds, there's an infinite number of worlds, higher and higher. So it's not just like we look out into outer space and we see these planets that are existing there and our expanding solar system. So that's on a physical level. But then imagine even on a spiritual level, there's so many worlds and it's infinite. There's really an infinite number. But then when it comes to God's essence, when it come to the essence of the Ein Sof, we call God the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, that's the best we can refer to him as the infinite one, blessed be he, then his essence, his being and essence is equal in the higher realms as it is in the lower realms. Just like the soul that we explained above, just like how the soul is equally present inside the body, in every single part of the body, regardless of which part we're looking at. And so then the Alter Rebbe says that this is what's explained in the Tikkunim, in the Tikkunei Zohar, where it says, "Ihu stimu dechol stimin." He is the most hiddenness of all the hiddenness. So what that means is that even in the high worlds that are hidden from us, so that are really concealed from us, they're too lofty for us to really be able to understand, God is actually still concealed there, just in the same way that he's concealed here in the lower realms. Because because no thought can grasp God at all, even in the highest of all realms. So it's like we think of these higher realms, and we talked about it a little bit even in Tanya, about how they have this heightened perception of spirituality and of godliness and of what's really going on and truth and all of that. Nevertheless, even in those highest of high realms where their perception is so fine-tuned, so attuned, God himself, in terms of his essence, is just as hidden as he is down here. And he's found there just as much as he's found here. And so again, it's just relating it, just like yesterday we talked about the soul, and we talked about how the soul is equally present in every single part of the body, but just the same way that it's present in every part of the body, it's also concealed within every part of the body. We can't point to any part of the body and say that's where the soul is, that's where the soul is not. That's how it is when it comes to God. And when we think about God filling all the worlds and being present in all the worlds. And what we'll see where this is leading up to is a question which we brought up yesterday, and it's going to be addressed as we get further into the chapter, is that if this is true, if this is really the true truth, that God is everywhere equally present and he's also equally concealed, why is it that we have special places? Why do we have something called the Holy of Holies? Why do we have a temple? How and in those places we say that God dwells within there? What does that mean when we say God dwells there? If we just finished learning about how God is equally in every single place. So the Alter Rebbe begins this explanation by telling us that, even though like spirituality and physicality, we're saying it's really the same God that's creating all of them. God is equally present, equally concealed in all of them. Nevertheless, let's be real, we obviously see that there's a difference between heaven and earth, between spirituality and physicality, right? So the Alter Rebbe says that what is the difference between the supernal worlds and the lower worlds? The difference is in terms of the drawing down of this life force that the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, that the Infinite One, blessed be He, meaning God, draws down and illuminates in a way of revelation out of concealment. So in Hebrew, that term is Gilui HaHelem. And then in brackets here, the Alter Rebbe says that this is one of the reasons why the drawing down of this life force is called by the name of Or, by the name of light. So just to explain that a little bit, so remember in the beginning, in the intro, we talked about the difference between the two different types of influences, that there's the influence that can come about in a way of light, of Or, and then there's the influence that can come about in a way of Shefa, which we said is like more like water, for example. And we said that the difference between them really is, one of the main differences is the fact that when the influence is coming about through light, the source doesn't change. The source stays the same. Versus when it's an influence that comes about through Shefa, the source changes because now the water is no longer in the pitcher. Now it's in the cup, right? So in Hasidic talk, we actually have terminology for this type of difference in revelation. And we say that the revelation that comes about with the water is a revelation that we call etzem v'hitpashtut, which literally means like there's the essence of the thing and then it spreads forth. So it's like you have the water, and that water is spreading forth. And it's like maybe we only spread forth some of that water. Maybe we only put a little bit of the water into the cup. Maybe we pour the water into a bunch of different cups. So it's like spreading forth. You're taking that essence and we're spreading it out into different areas. This is by contrast to light, as we've been mentioning, where it's not about that the light is there and then we're taking the light and we're spreading it around. Because if we were to do that, then we'd only be able to put that light in a finite number of vessels, because eventually the light would run out, right? Just like the water, yes, you can pour it into a bunch of different cups, but at some point or another, you're going to run out of water and you're not going to be able to keep pouring it into cups. Yes, you can continue to pour the water from those cups into other cups, but we're working with a finite amount of water. Versus when it comes to light, it doesn't have that same finitude. And the reason for that is because the way by which light influences the other is not in the same way. It's not by way of etzem v'hitpashtut. It's not by way of like the essence and then the spreading forth, but it actually is by way of Gilui HaHelem. It's the revelation of that which is concealed. Which a good way to understand this is, again, going back to that light show that we were talking about. So again, when we see like blue light, what does that mean? Does it mean that the actual light coming out is blue? No. Light itself is devoid of color. Light itself is totally neutral and it's totally simple. But what happens is there's a blueness, there's a vessel of some sort. I don't know all the technicalities of how this works, but there's some kind of like reflective lens of some form or another that we call blue, that we associate with blueness, so that when the light shines forth, it translates into looking like it's blue. So it's revealing the hidden blueness in whatever it is. Or like, let's say if we look at things on the ground and we see nature around us, and we can see that because of the sunlight. The sunlight is now shining and showing us the beautiful ground and nature around us. So it's not giving it something that wasn't there to begin with. So it's not like the light is producing the plant life and the tree life and the colors and all of those things. It's merely just revealing that which was there. And again, the light itself doesn't lose anything of its own in the process. So this is a really big topic in its own right, but the Alter Rebbe brought it up here, so I thought it was important to get into a little bit. So now let's get back into the text. So again, just again, briefly to bring it back in, is that we're talking about this because we're explaining how this is how God operates, and God's influence upon all of his worlds, whether it's the lower worlds or the higher worlds, is in this way of light. It's not like the water where like it goes here and it doesn't go there and it can only be in one place at a time. It's more like light, which can be in many places at once, and it is just what it reveals is different, but the light itself is the same. And so this light comes down, and what does the light do? The light is there and it vivifies all of the worlds and all of the creatures within the worlds. And when we talk about the higher worlds, the more supernal worlds, they receive this light in a way that's a little bit more revealed than the lower worlds. And each creature within these worlds receive it according to their nature and according to their ability and according to their makeup and according to the specific type of influence that is very specific and individual to them that God shines onto them. And the lower realms, by contrast, even the more spiritual lower realms, receive this revelation, but it's covered up in a lot of different vestments, a lot of different clothing, through which God, what does he do with this clothing, these vestments, is he enclose this vitality and the light that he shines down and radiates to these creatures in order to vivify them. So just to bring that full circle and kind of explain that a little bit more, is like if you kind of picture, like, let's say we want to talk about light again, and let's say we're picturing like a stained glass window that has many different types of glass. Some of the glass is a little bit more opaque, some of the glass is a little bit more translucent, and you shine one light through this glass. So it's the same light that's shining through the glass. And then let's say you're on the other side of the glass and you see the light coming through. You'll see the sunlight shining through. So it's one sunlight, and we're all aware that it's one sunlight. However, we'll also be aware of the fact that on some areas, like of the painting, let's say of the glass, the light will be coming back out in more full force. And in other areas, the light will be coming out in less full force. In some areas, the light will be coming through in one color, another area in a different color. One will be reflecting a certain drawing, another one will be reflecting another drawing. So the light really serves to reveal the picture that we're looking at in a way that it reveals each part of the picture in its own way, in the way that's appropriate to it. However, we're all aware of the fact that the light itself is exactly the same. It's just in terms of the revelation that's different. So again, going back to the analogy or to that analog of what it is that we're trying to understand in terms of God's influence in all of the worlds, it's a reminder to us, or it's something that the Ultra is trying to teach us, that God's influence is exactly the same in all of the worlds. Whether we're talking about the higher worlds, the lower worlds, we can't say that God is more present in the heavens than he is on earth. We can't say God is more in this world, more with this person than he is with that person. God is everywhere equally. What is true is that the revelation of this influence is different in different worlds, and each one according to its ability, according to its capacity, according to what is appropriate for it. So now we're going to talk about our world, and we're going to talk about how it is that this light manifests in our world, and how our world is really considered to be the most concealed of all of the world. So the Alter Rebbe says that these levushim, these vestments that we've been talking about, through which God vests and encloses and hides his light and his vitality, became so great and so intense to the point that he was able to create this physical world, this material physical world, and that God creates it and he animates it with a vitality and a light which he shines forth into this world. And this light is vested and hidden within many different vestments, and that these vestments are extremely intense, and they really, really conceal this light and this vitality a lot, to the point that we don't even see the light at all. We don't see the vitality. All we see are these physical objects. All we see is this coarse materiality that looks lifeless. So like I mentioned in the title of today, like a pet rock, like when you look, I think a pet rock is like the perfect example of that. When you look at a rock, it looks totally lifeless. There's nothing about it. It doesn't move. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't do anything. But yet what we learn in Tanya, and this is a big theme that comes up over and over again in Tanya, is that even this rock, even your pet rock, contains within it godliness. It's just that pet rock is like that opaque pane of glass through which the light is just like not shining through, like barely at all, if anything. But there is a light behind it. We just don't see it. And so the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says that even though we don't see this light inside of these physical objects that appear to be as if dead, there actually is this light and there actually is this vitality, which is bringing them into being something from nothing all the time, so that they will not go back to being not and nothing. And this light comes from the Infinite One, blessed be He. It's just that it comes about and it's vested in many different vestments. As is written in the Eitz Chaim, which is a Kabbalistic sefer, that the light and the vitality of the orb of the earth, this material earth that we live in, which we see, comes, where does it come from? It comes from Malchus of Asiyah. So this is going to get a little bit Kabbalistic, so just bear with me. And it's not too important to know exactly the terminology and know specifically what we're talking about here, but in brief, we've talked about this previously, there's like a map, kind of a spiritual map of all the worlds. So, and there's a spiritual map of different energies. So when we talk about our world stems from the lowest world, which is the world of Asiyah. So there's 4 main worlds. There's Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. You can go back and listen to previous episodes to get more of an understanding about what all those are. But for our purposes today, Asiyah, what you need to know, that's the lowest of all the worlds. Not only does it come from Asiyah, it comes from the Malchus of Asiyah. What's the Malchus of Asiyah? That's the lowest part of Asiyah. Not only does it come from Malchus of Asiyah, it comes from Malchus of Asiyah. So that means that it comes from the lowest part of that world of Asiyah. However, the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says, inside of that Malchus of Asiyah is contained the Malchus of Yetzirah, which Yetzirah is that world that is one level up. So there's a connection here between all the worlds. They're not in isolation. There's like a chain kind of reactionary effect between each one of the worlds where they're feeding into each other. So within the Malchus of Asiyah is contained the Malchus of Yetzirah, etc. And so also in Malchus of Yetzirah is also the Malchus of Bria, etc., which also contains the Malchus of Atzilus. So really they're all connected back up until ultimately what the Alter Rebbe is getting at, they all contain the 10 spheres of Atzilus, which Atzilus is that higher world. And that Atzilus that we talked about is what makes it different than all the other worlds and higher than all the worlds. It's totally unified with the emanator, with God himself. So just to recap that, basically to bring out the main points, I don't think it's so important to understand technically in detail what all those worlds are, at least not for today. The main point that the Alter Rebbe is bringing out is that even though we're here in this opaque world where godliness is truly, really, really concealed, we should know that God is still here. And we may not see it, but it's the same light that's being shown from, just like that stained glass window. There may be more opaque dressings here, more opaque vestments, but it's the same light that's coming through. And that light that we're getting, it's being vested in these vestments that come from the lowest of all worlds. But within that lowest of lowest world is enclosed a world that is slightly higher than that. And within that world is enclosed a world that is slightly higher than that, and so on and so forth. Until if you go back far enough, you can see that direct chain of events, that direct link back to the source itself, which is God. So I hope that was enlightening to you and interesting, and we will continue tomorrow when we move on to a new chapter 52, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.